Hello, everyone. I just want to talk about William Blake today. William Blake is one of my favorite poets. He was an early Romantic poet, came slightly before some of the bigger names of the Romantic movement. Coleridge is one of them. We will study one of his works. Also, Wordsworth and a few others came slightly after Blake. So he's one of the very early Romantic poets. So everything that I mentioned in the video on Romanticism with a capital R, which you can go back and watch, still applies to Mr. Blake and to understanding his poetry. So if you recall, some of the aspects of the Romantic movement are its highly emotional poetry, right? A spontaneous outflow of emotion. Also, it is very concerned with nature. You're going to see a lot of images of nature and natural images. Very concerned with religion and sort of reclaiming religion in the face of the Enlightenment movement. And very interested also in how nature applies to religion. Okay, so these are some interesting ideas. Mr. Blake himself, we'll call him Mr. Blake, nice formality. Um, he was what you would call a mystic. Okay, now this is a controversial term today, but he was a Christian mystic, which some people feel is a contradiction. At the time, it really wasn't. There were some more mystical, sort of mystery religion aspects to Christianity that sort of have died off today, but they existed at the time. And it wasn't very uncommon to be both a mystic, someone who dealt with the idea of mysticism and sort of the, um, sort of hidden mysteries of the universe, occult, esoteric mysteries, you might say. He was concerned with these things. So if you feel that's a contradiction inherently, I totally understand. A lot of people thought Blake was insane during his own time. He was considered kind of a madman. He claimed to have visions. So I guess he really was, you could say he was a madman. He claimed to have visions of spiritual things, angels, demons. When he was a young boy, he told his parents, the story goes, that he saw God in a tree. I guess that makes sense to some people. I'm not sure. But, very eccentric guy. Lived a life of poverty, not very well known. Until now, today, he's considered one of the most important, not only one of the most important Romantic poets, but also one of the most important English artists of all time. I will put a link in the description to some of his visual artwork. He was also a visual artist and a really good one. He made these prints that were usually had to do with biblical subject matter. That was most of his printmaking. Had angels and demons and depictions of the Book of Job and various characters from the Bible and from biblical lore. But he was very well steeped in it, and not just from a biblical sense. He also knew all the other esoteric traditions that surrounded a lot of those stories. So he saw them in a way that other people didn't. And he made these really beautiful engravings, and he actually invented a style of etching or printmaking. And so, very interesting, eccentric guy. Basically, died in poverty, not very well known. Concerned very heavily with reforming the society in which he lived, and in multiple ways. He didn't necessarily see, his like any kind of activist route to his Reformation, but through his artwork, he advocated for the Reformation, the conscious reformation of his society. Specifically, a lot of the problem at this time, this is the early industrial age, okay? And so factories and things are just becoming a part of people's lives. And in the early days of industry, there weren't any of the like the labor laws that we have today that protected people from unfair treatment. Or things like child labor laws, which are also a problem. For the longest time, if you were a child of 5 or 6, you could go and work in the factory. And of course, children were supposed to be out playing, not working in factories. And besides that, they would sustain injuries and things. And it was generally considered humane, such to the point that today we have child labor laws, right? No such thing existed really in William Blake's time. He was also very concerned with the reformation of the church. He was a very deeply religious man. Now, you could say he was misguided because of his religious views or whatever you want to say, but he was a very deeply religious man. That doesn't mean that he couldn't be critical of the church. And so a lot of the poems that you read, he keep in mind, you should read them not as someone that hates religion going after religion, but you should read them as a Christian, a person who believes in a Christian identity, who is raging against the injustices he sees that are being perpetrated in the name of Christendom and the church. So very important that you read, specifically the Garden of Love. You're going to read that poem and you're going to detect a tone of malice or disdain for the church as an institution. And I want to clarify that that's not done from a place of, and even if it was, it wouldn't matter, but it's important that you understand the context of the poem. So this is a Christian man who is sort of hoping for a reformation of the Christian church that he is subject to. So these are very interesting poems. He produced several bodies of work. One of the most important ones I want to mention is the Songs of Innocence and Experience. Okay, and I should have the dates on hand. I'll put them in the description as well. But the Songs of Innocence and Experience were produced in two separate works. And first came, I believe, the Songs of Innocence. And the Songs of Innocence is done like a children's book. It's very colorful. It's very pastoral, which means of like the sheep in the fields and the nice clean brooks and all the nice birds in the sky. And it's very natural, it's very quaint, and it's very innocent. And Blake defined innocence as sort of the idea that everything is just fine and you should trust whimsically in the flow of time. You know, the God, the universe, whatever you want to call it. Just trust. And that was the state of innocence. And he believed that we were all sort of born into a state of innocence. But then over time, the innocence that we have doesn't equate to the natural world. Things exist in nature that don't really match up with the idea of innocence being a favorable thing. Things also harden you. You lose your innocence as you age. And a lot of people use this as an excuse to sort of say, well, adults deserve bad things and children don't because they're innocent. And that may be so. But he played with these ideas. Like, what is innocence really? And is innocence really positive? We tend to value innocence. We value the innocence of children, for example. We try to protect that innocence. And we should on some level, I think. But is it really a good thing? Do you want to hang on to your innocence forever? Do you want to gain knowledge? If you gain knowledge, do you lose your innocence? And it's very biblical in essence, you know, if you think back to the Edenic story. You know, the fruit of knowledge robs Adam and Eve of their innocence. And so these are very powerful concepts. And he did one group of poems and engravings that was the Songs of Innocence, and then he did another that was the Songs of Experience. Two of the poems, there's the Two Chimney Sweeps that you're going to read in the packet. There's also the Tiger and the Lamb. Okay, well, the Lamb and the Tiger. The Lamb came, I think Innocence came first, and so the Lamb is in the Songs of Innocence. And then the Tiger is in the Songs of Experience. And they're supposed to kind of go together. They have like a binary going on. And I really want you to think about that binary. Why are these poems how are they speaking to each other? And how do they show us through their contrast this binary of innocence and experience and what that means in the big picture, right? Very cool stuff. He's hard to understand, but if you can get under the surface and see what's going on, he's one of the most amazing people, I think, in the artistic world. His engravings are awesome. Check them out. The other important work I wanted to mention is The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, which was, again, he's playing with binaries and fusing binaries together. And we will read some poems from The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. The Proverbs of Hell. I want to give one mention about the Proverbs of Hell. Those are going to weird you out. Okay, those are strange. And you know what? There's no right answer. So just do what you can with the Proverbs of Hell. I'm going to give you guys a couple of days to work on William Blake and kind of digest him a little bit. And then maybe I'll release some more videos where we'll talk in more depth about his poetry. Please try to go ahead and get to the discussion as soon as you can, so that when I do give those videos, I'm not like force-feeding you answers, because if I see my own answers reflected in your answers, I'll know where they came from. And, you know, so just try to do what you can with Blake, and then I will make a video. We'll get in more depth on his poems, specifically in the words on the page. Also, keep an eye out for Samuel Taylor Coleridge. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner is pretty long, but it's coming up. You may want to, if you've read all the Blake poems, you may want to read ahead. Start on Mr. Coleridge, because that one is a doozy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a lovely chat. Stay safe, stay well, and please email me if you have any questions whatsoever.